Hey everybody, it's Jim here. Welcome back to the Audiomo Podcast number 8. I know we're a few days late, but it was the weekend and it was Halloween. So, with that out of the way, how are you doing tonight, Dave?
I'm all right. I'm a little bit sick, so we're going to power through it, but, it's cool to catch up. You've been chatting with other people other than me, so it's been a while since we talked.
I chatted with one person, and it was a studio head from my favorite studio in the whole world. It's not like I'm booking up other guests left and right, but who knows what I'm doing behind the scenes, right?
Ooh, yeah. You know what? I feel slighted either way. So you know what? We'll move on. We keep moving.
I will Amazon you some Kleenex tissues to make up for both your sickness and your sadness. But with the banter out of the way, we're going to start with the JHS Rat Pedal, and we're going to transition it into the topic that you see in the thumbnail, which is brands kind of copying and being inspired by other designs of the past. So you mentioned you want to talk about some specifics of the new JHS Rat Pedal, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's cool. I really like JHS. Regardless of, I know you have different feelings than me on the Rat. I like this thing that they're doing with these pedals where you've got like the multi versions, right? I think they started with
Bonsai.
Was the Muffaletta? No, I think the Muffaletta was first, and that was the one with all of the different big muffs, and then they did the Bonsai, which is all of the tube screamers. And I believe this is the third in the series. I don't think there's another one in between, but I think it's the third one in the series, right? So this is all the Rats. It's just a cool concept, right? And I mean, obviously he's doing the whole thing with it being like, they're actually versions of the pedals inside the pedal. It's not just like modeling or, like small component fixes. Like he's doing full on, pedal changes in there, which is really super cool. I just always wish that they're a little less expensive, like $250 for, I get it, right? It's 9 Rats, but it's also 9 of the same pedal. So, I mean, I feel like not the same exact pedal, but slight variations of the same pedals. It's like $250 feels a little hard to swallow for me, but I mean, honestly, I watched the JHS video for it. I watched him go through all the Rats, and then I went and bought a Turbo Rat because I was like, hey, I could use that, and they're like $90, so whatever. But that being said, like, I think that the Tube Screamer one, it would be a really cool addition to a studio, just to be able to be like, I need all of these flavors of Tube Screamer in different scenarios. I think that's a really neat idea. What are your thoughts on this 9-in-1 pedals?
The Bonsai is the one I like, and you were just alluding to it. I think that I could see myself using that for multiple situations, whether it's being in a live and not having to adjust it. If I wanted to go with like the classic, not the TS9, the turbo one, I think that's what it is. It's a little bit more modernish sounding. I really like that with the Drive Master. I had one of those before. But the Bonsai, I think, is fantastic. Obviously, I don't like the Rat, whether JHS makes it, whether the original company makes it, whatever. It's just not my style of kind of distortion. But I do. But one thing that you pointed out that I think is very important people take away from this, it is 9 different pedals inside of one. It's not just kind of, half-assing it or, placebo effect modeling after it. So for that effect, I'd like to say I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's JHS, so it's a great pedal. It's good quality. It's going to do what it's saying it's doing. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a tough sell on it at $250. Although I think if I was really interested, it probably wouldn't stop me. I just don't need that many versions of a Rat. Like I said, I bought one Rat and that'll be fine for me. I think if I see a good used price on the Bonsai, maybe I'll pick it up at some point. Because it does seem like to be a good studio tool to have. Although, that being said, I already have like 4 Tube Screamers. So, do I really need a 9-in-1 Tube Screamer? Probably not. But, I don't know.
Yeah, I mentioned I tried I think it was the turbo. This is going to really bother me. I'm going to sound like an idiot. But that version of the Tube Screamer, and it wasn't even mine. It was just one of those things where we talk about people leaving stuff at your place after they come to record. So like it became mine for a little while, and then he's just like, I want it back. And I was like, oh, here you go. I'm fine giving it up. I've never owned a Screamer on my own. I never purchased one. And I don't know. I've never needed it. Like I've had the Drive Master, and it's always been kind of like, oh, that sounds good. So, but I don't need other drive pedals to do kind of that sound. I'm happy with what I have. But, when you're trying to push in a little bit something different into a mix and stuff like that, I like the kind of overdrives that are digital now to a lot more than I used to. Like on the Quad Cortex, some of the boosts, and they're pretty decent, but it would be nice to have something like a dedicated Tube Screamer-ish style pedal. And if I was going to do it, it would be the Bonsai, because it would give me the most for my money. But transitioning out of the specific JHS thing, I wanted to get that out of the way, and I wanted to let you, talk about your comments on the Rat in specific, because I didn't want it to seem like I was going to be picking on JHS, because I'm really not in this. What I want to talk about is, why are certain brands, like when you look at the Suhrs, the Tom Andersons, all of those kinds of brands that basically make very classic style guitars, they get praised when they do it. But other brands, when they do the same exact thing, that might not have that reputation as far as, within the community, not having worked for those companies in the past, because that's something that's common with these builders. They end up leaving the companies that they originally worked for and starting their own shops. They might not get the same respect as far as, whatever. They'll immediately be called knockoffs and replicas. So what I'd like to get to is, where do you think the line is, and how do you feel about that? Do you get that same kind of perception from the guitar community?
So you posed this question to me earlier in the week, and I think you started off with sort of the Pack Rat kind of comparison, right? And I was like, well, you know what? I don't think the Pack Rat is a good comparison because of the obvious that it's 9 pedals in one, right? You can't buy a Rat that is a Pack Rat, right? Because it inherently is just more things. And I was like, so that sort of makes it a bad example for this particular kind of discussion. But then the more I think about it, I think it's actually exactly to the point of the discussion, right? Where it's like, I think the only time the knockoffs really work is if you're either coming from a brand or even just that specific model that's really going to do something or is doing something that the original's not doing, right? Nobody likes, John Mayer going over to PRS and basically creating what is essentially just a Strat with a PRS headstock on it, because they know that you can make that same thing at Fender, right? Fender could have done that just obviously without the PRS headstock. I think, to me, the perfect example of this is the Schecter Nick Johnston Strat, where it's just like, what is Schecter adding to the Strat conversation? Like, nothing, right? Like, there's nothing inherently Schectery about a Strat, and there's nothing inherent that they're putting into it that's like, oh, I can see why I would want this version of a Strat. Whereas you go to a Suhr, like you talked about, that there's just like, their thing is that they're going to make the best version of that guitar you've ever played, right? Or, you talk about Charvel, right? Which is obviously a little bit different because they're under Fender, but like, they're building a super Strat, right? So their thing is just like, I want a Strat that also rips, right? So they're adding something to the flavor there, right? Like, so to me, I think the line is always, if I'm not getting anything else out of it, like, then why are they just allowed to copy it, right? And that, I don't know, I'm struggling to think of more examples. I think the Schecter one is really like my favorite one, where every time I see that guitar, I'm like, why? Like, what is Schecter doing here? Why would I play this guitar versus any other Strat?
That's really interesting timing. You have this uncanny way of doing this. Did you know that today I was actually looking at Schecter guitars? Now, I'll tell you why, and that was because I was looking for something relatively cheap that would come with a Bigsby in a Telecaster style body. I wanted to see if Fender made anything, just out of sheer curiosity's sake. So I started shopping around, and I find out they have a version called the PT Fastback, right? It's a Telecaster Deluxe with the Schecter headstock, 2 humbuckers. It looks just like a Fender body with a Bigsby on it. Yeah, the price is really good. I think it's $699. It has coil splits, and I mean, that's pretty much it. It comes in a Sherwood green, or not a Sherwood green, that's the Fender code. It's emerald green, I'm sorry, and kind of like a rubyish red. And then they make a version that does not have the Bigsby on it for $100 less at $499. Or is it $4 or $5.99? Either way, Shoreline Gold, it looks just like the Chris Shiflett, except it has the inlays on it. I thought kind of the same thing. I'm like, well, yeah, granted, this is $300 cheaper than maybe the Fender variant's going to be, but is it bringing something else to the table, so to speak, where the price difference is so big? Because for me, with like the Harley Benton versus the Charvel, you're talking about less than half the price. But when it's only like a 25% difference in the price, it becomes like a little more blurry. And it's like, I understand from a business standpoint that a brand like Schecter especially is pigeonholed by a lot of people into being like, oh, that's a heavy metal and a hardcore kind of guitar line. So I can see why they would want to branch out, but at the same time, it goes back to your initial point of, I mean, what is it really adding outside of saying, hey, we do offer a vintage-ish style kind of guitar also?
Yeah, it's tough too. I mean, I feel like, especially with Schecter, and I'm just going to pick on them here, like, I just think their guitars kind of suck. Like, you know, every time I've played one, it's always just been like, yeah, you know, like there's nothing, I don't know, there's nothing there really. Like they don't stand out in features compared to other, even guitars like you're saying in their kind of like genre, you know, like obviously I would go with an LTD over a Schecter any day. And I don't know, they just like, they're not even particularly cool looking. Like this fastback is like, I don't really dig the headstock and the pick guard in particular, but like you said, for 25% difference or whatever, like they're not giving you anything. It's not exceptional pickups, you know, like you're not getting really good woods or anything like that. Like it's just the same thing, but like a little bit more metally. I don't know. They're just not my favorite, I guess, but I don't know. What do you think?
Schecters are. I have to say, I tried the Nick Johnston, not the USA one. I tried the one that you were talking about that you said basically brought nothing. It was in a kind of really nice pink finish, actually. It had single humbucker. I thought the neck was very nice on it. I was very surprised by the neck. The neck on that and the fretwork was better than the Sterlings that I have tried, the Music Mans, which was, I don't know why that surprised me. Maybe it's because I've just never thought, kind of like you, I never thought Schecter guitars were that good, but I never had so much experience. And I was really impressed with how the guitar felt. Not enough to be like, oh my God, when I get home, I got to find a used one of these for steel. But, you know, impressed enough where I was just like, oh, well, you know, they're definitely coming along. They're coming into their own. So I don't know. I just don't see how you can build. Like if you're a new guitar player and you're looking around and you're shopping for like a traditional style guitar, like what's going to be the thing about that makes you buy the Schecter over the Mexican Fender or even like the Squire, really, at that point?
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because, you know, I feel like we could probably hop around to a bunch of different examples here, right? Like you're saying, the Harley Benton doing the Super Strat thing is like you know, it's about the angle, right? The angle is Harley Benton's super cheap and I can mod it and do whatever I want with it, right? Suhr is about the complete opposite angle. It's a crazy expensive because, you know, it's like a one of a kind experience. The thing is going to be, you know, hand polish in every possible sense of the word. Like there's going to be somebody looking over every millimeter detail of that guitar, and that's why you go with that, right? Versus like, you know, I'm trying to even think of like other versions of this kind of stuff where it's just, you just get the things that live in that Schecter area where it's like the cost difference isn't crazy. It's not one way higher or the other, but it's basically just a ripoff. You know, and then you got, when we're talking about pedals, like, you know, you get obviously you have like a Klon, and then you have like the Klon, right? Where the point of it is that it's supposed to be a reasonable version of what a Klon would be, you know, so like, is that bad, or is it just that's filling a need? Like, and then at one point when you're talking about, you know, a clone that's like, I don't know, $500 or $600, like, is that really achieving the same goal? Obviously Klons are like $3,000 or $4,000, right? So like, yes, it's cheaper than that, but it's still too expensive. So like, I don't know. This is a weird space. The copycat thing is weird. Like, unless you're bringing something new or you're hitting a drastically different price market, I feel like it's just not the right way to go. It doesn't feel, and I feel like people feel that kind of like when these brands announce new stuff and then you see big backlash about it. You know, I think that was a lot of what happened with the Silver Sky stuff, where it was just like, it felt like he left Fender and then just went, build me a Strat, and PRS barely put their spin on it, you know, which just is what made it feel, I guess, disingenuous. But I don't know. I know we've talked about the Silver Sky a little bit, and I think you said you've played a couple of them, right? What are your thoughts on kind of the design aesthetics versus, obviously, I'm sure it's a fantastic guitar. It's a, you know, mid $2,000 PRS. I'm sure it plays amazing, but, you know, does it stand out? Is there a reason it's a PRS instead of a Fender?
Yes. Absolutely. And I can sum it up in one brief analogy. I've played them in different stores, in different states, from different time periods. Every single one that I picked up, regardless of what store I was in or, the circumstances, they all played great immediately. Like it was something that I could take it off of the wall and be like, oh, I don't need to set this up. I can play it tonight. I don't get that from Fender. And it doesn't matter what, I don't get that from Fender. And and that's not to say that the Fenders are bad, but I think part of that extra cost and why I can understand why some people do it. Notice I don't own a Silver Sky. I don't think I ever will. I won't say never, but it's not something that I really interests me to that point. However, that being said, I understand it. After playing them, I'm like, oh, if I was like the Strat guy, and all I had were Strats, and all I wanted was Strats, that would be the Strat that I would, if I had the money for like the one go-to gigging Strat, that would probably be it because I could rely on it and I know it would stand up for me. But I mean, it's tough. And I think the main thing is brands like, Nash and LSL where, they're really, really similar looking Defenders, like really similar, even down to like the relicking stuff and that kind of features of it. Like I think Suhr does a really good job of kind of defining, even like if you look at the Mateus Asado, which is basically HSS Stratocaster, it still looks like a Suhr. Like when you look at it, like you recognize it's a Strat body, but in the back of your head, you're like, oh, that's a Suhr guitar. Whereas when you look at an LSL, a Nash, and some of these other kinds of brands that go for a similar kind of Fendery vibe, I don't get that. I think like, oh, that's like almost like a parts caster. I don't know. It's weird. And that's not to say that they're bad guitars. It's just, there's no differentiation enough to me to be like, oh, I desire one of those guitars. And one brand that we've talked about before that I've said, and I think you've agreed with me, that we don't necessarily like the aesthetic of are, what was it, Fanos? Or was it? Oh, what was the other? Yeah, I think it was Fano, and there was another one. Yeah. Novo, Fano, and Novo. Yes, we've both said that they might be the best players in the whole world, and you know what? I give them credit for trying different things with their designs. They're just not for me. So, I mean, but that's the risk you take. But I would rather be one of those brands, honestly, and be doing something completely original than be doing something like what LSL and what Nash are doing. Just me personally.
Sure. Yeah. And I think another thing to hit on here too is that, especially when you're talking about Suhr, maybe part of it is also brand, like self-awareness, I think, right? So Suhr, I think, does a really good job of saying like, we're not trying to say we're not copying them, but we're going to go out there and we're going to work with guys who, are actively making this decision between, a custom shop Fender and a Suhr, right? Like they go to Pete Thorne and they say like, you're in the studio 24/7 shredding. Like if you're going to have the best, you're going to go with a Suhr, right? And I think that kind of leads to this perception of where it's like, well, I mean, there's got to be something else there too. It can't just be that it's just a nice Telly, right? Or a nice Strat. And, maybe this is my unawareness of those other brands, but they don't have that same thing going for them either, right? So I think like part of it's got to be what you can get away with as a brand and also what you're doing in the space, right? And maybe that's also part of the reason the Schecter Strat doesn't really work for me, because it's like, this doesn't fit your brand aesthetic for one, so it really just feels like you're like, well, we don't have enough in the Strat space, so let's just make something to fill that hole in our portfolio, So, and again, I think this kind of always goes back to like people immediately know when something feels a little disingenuous. And, for me, it kind of just makes it seem like they just probably offered Nick Johnston the most money out of all the guys who would build him a Strat. And that's why he did it,
I understand. And I think I agree with you. I think I do. Because I don't know, I don't see the appeal otherwise, especially in that specific instance. But then again, we don't know everything. We don't know what kind of relationships that Nick may have with people at the brand or how he grew up playing or anything like that. So there could be a whole backstory to debunk everything that was just said. But at the end of the day, you can only look at things at face value. Not everybody's going to sit and Google all the information for everything. So on face value, your assessment sounds spot on to me. I don't really see the other reasoning for it, but yeah, I think Suhr, again, I almost bought one today. Did you know that? It sold before I could buy it. I wasn't going to buy it to keep it. I was going to resell it. It was an Alt T which is a semi-hollow body Telecaster with 2 humbuckers in it. And I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, that price is too good. $19.99, and it was mint.
So is there a version of the thin line?
Mm-hmm.
That right?
Gorgeous. But before I had that like stall, and that's all it takes. I had that little stall of like 2 minutes. I was just like, quick, go to Reverb, look up prices. And then by the time I went back, it's like, this listing has sold. And I was like, damn it. I'm like, it was too good. But no, I'm one day I'm going to get myself one of those. I really, really want to try one and, see what all the real fuss is about. Because it's one thing to try one in a store or one thing to just sit with one for, like an hour or so if somebody has one in a studio. But owning a guitar like that, it's different. And I didn't fully appreciate PRS until I owned, a core PRS. And then, the floodgates opened. So hopefully, it would be a similar experience.
Yeah, I think I've told myself I'm going to do the same thing when I'm old and retired and I've got nothing else going on, and I can be like, yeah, whatever, I'll drop $3,000 on a guitar. I'll buy a Suhr. We can jam on them together.
We'll both have alt tees. We'll both have thin line Telecasters.
Hey man, out of all the non standard Telecasters, I do think the thin line's like one of my favorites, especially in the seafoam green.
Yes, I love that color. I like that color a lot with binding as well, because the white really makes it pop out. Had me thinking about guitars I can't afford right now, and I don't want to be doing that. But speaking about Fender, because you mentioned a Fender color, here is something that you didn't know until just before we started this podcast, and it is news in the industry. Fender has purchased Presonus. And if you're not familiar with Presonus, they're people that make interfaces, mic preamps, all that kind of fun stuff. I could see this being very smart for Fender because there's a lot of kind of modern technology they want to do. There's a lot, they want to become the all-in-one shop where you buy the guitar from them, you buy your lessons from them, you buy the interface to record all of it together. Maybe it works as a cohesive unit, so to speak. What are your thoughts about this? A smart move, or is it just, Fender doing what Fender does and buying more companies?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, like, I feel like we've been seeing this a lot with recently, like, obviously Gibson buying Mesa and all that kind of stuff, and then it sort of just kind of, stays the same, which is fine. I'd take that over them, ruining the brand, right? Which is always a possibility when any large company buys a smaller company, let alone if that company is Gibson. But not to get onto that train at all. I think it's interesting from a packaging standpoint, right? Like you're saying, like they want to be this like one-stop shop. That's cool. I think would it be the worst thing ever if you were selling Squiers with little, 2-channel interfaces and stuff as a package deal that's cool. That's cool. More people get into it. Definitely cool. I think Presonus has a weird spot in the industry, and it'd be interesting to see if that gets affected by Fender at all. And I'm curious, what's your relationship with Presonus these days?
I see them as the brand in between Behringer and Focusrite. I think that's the best way I can describe where I see Presonus in the marketplace. And I think it's a really good opportunity for Fender because you had the same idea I did. What I was thinking is you bundle it in, say you get a classic vibe guitar. I think those are like $450, and you get a set of headphones, a cheap, like one of the package microphones that comes in the interface bundle, and the interface for like $650, $700, and you market it as, we're going to give you all these lessons so you can plug right into your computer or your iPad or your phone or whatever. You can record your own music, maybe include some free software that already comes with, what is that, Studio One?
Yeah, Studio One, yep.
Yeah, so Studio One already included. Maybe they give you the full version of it, something like that, depending on which model of Fender that you're getting. Maybe if you get a Mexican one, you get the regular version. You just get the light one with, a Squier version. There's so many different options and packaging things that they can do with this and kind of, move inventory that might not necessarily be selling right now on top of that, as well as rebranding it. So I think it's a really good idea. I don't love Presonus stuff, but I don't hate Presonus stuff. I think it's just right in between, and for my money, the Focusrite's not much more, and I just have had such good luck with them since I started recording. So I would always lean towards them.
Yeah, I agreed. I definitely prefer the Focusrite stuff. I have used plenty of Presonus stuff in my youth when it was all I could afford. I will say I do think that lately they've gotten much better, with the quality, just as everybody's ability to, package better quality and for lower price. But they have like a barrier to entry into a couple of areas in the interface world that I think are really interesting that I've only gotten a chance to play with. Don't own any, but like their signal over Ethernet stuff, super cool. Nobody else does that anywhere near this ballpark of a range of price, right? Like you could get an interface and then, run a whole, like mixing setup to somebody in a second room just over a single Ethernet cable for like, somewhere in the ballpark of $1,000 to $2,000. Like that's insane. Nobody gets even near there. So that's really cool. I don't think the Fender thing will help or burden that side of what Presonus does in any way. But I do like that they're a company that's willing to get into the really expensive stuff and bring it down to something that's, reasonable for me to try as like a mid-level area, right? Whereas Focusrite has something similar, super expensive. And then after that, like you're talking into like big guys who like you need cards in your computers to expand into that space. So I'm cool with it as long as it doesn't affect that area. I think the bundling thing is neat. If it gets more people to play guitar, any of that stuff's great, right? Like we just need more of that going around, I guess.
I'm just smiling because I like the word neat.
Well, I mean, that's how I feel about it. I don't have any feelings for it one way. I'm not going to go buy a fucking Squire with a Presonus interface bundled in with it. But like if some kid gets that for Christmas and he's excited to learn guitar, awesome. Then it did exactly what it was supposed to do.
It is quite neat indeed. I think it's a smart move. There's no financials disclosed as of yet. Sometimes they announce those things, sometimes they don't. But I'd be interested in later down the line seeing how much exactly it cost Fender. But if I was to guess, I'm going to guess they got out pretty okay on this. And on top of that, smart business move, hits an area of their market share they don't have right now because they own a billion guitar companies and not so much on the recording end. So I think it's a good move. Better than some moves that competitors have made, such as Marshall and Gibson, as we alluded to in the past. And before we get into our albums, I am going to tell everybody about the guitar that I sent you this week that we always talk about. I found a purple Gibson Les Paul Goddess. So I was so excited to show Dave. So I sent it to him, and I will let Dave tell you what he thought of the guitar and what he thought of the price.
Yeah, well, I mean, on one, it looked gorgeous. Obviously, it looked like it was in great condition. I mean, it was a local pickup in California, so that would have been a problem. But $4,500 for a Les Paul that's used, it's not happening. I mean, what do you remember? What did they go for new?
I think $17.99.
Yeah, and even that would have been a hard pill to swallow for me, I think. Like, but now that we're getting into this like ludicrous, $5,000, $6,000 for a used one, there's no way. There's no way this is happening. This is some dream I have that I'm gonna like find one in a garage. Is the only way that it's ever gonna happen, or somebody's gonna be like, oh, I just won the lottery and I bought you this guitar. But I'm not. As much as I love them, and what's hysterical to me about it is that it is a Les Paul that just has some modern features, which basically is just an LTD. And I love it, but like, I don't know. I'm never gonna buy one.
It makes me sad because I had the blue one and I only spent $1,000.
Say that would have been perfect. I'd spend $1,000 on one, especially in the purple.
No. Yeah, I'm more of a blue guy. I happen to be partial to the color blue, especially that kind of blue. But that was my ex-girlfriend's guitar, and yep, I ended up keeping her. So God knows where that is. Part of me, oh, this is so sad. Part of me, she also went to Full Sail. I had in the past debated messaging her and just trying to see if she still had the guitar. And if she, no, because it'd be like, well, how much would you take for it?
Dude, you don't want to know. You don't want the answer to that question. No, yeah.
No, it was not that kind of a breakup. We actually had a very, very nice breakup, believe it or not. Get the fuck out of here. You're a nutcase. I don't know who you dated or what you did to those girls, but I wouldn't have to worry about that being held blackmail.
Hey, man, I've been dating my wife since high school, so, you know.
No, you just have one potential of the end of the world. That's all you have, my friend. But, you know, marriage is forever and all that fun stuff, and you guys are never going to break up, so I'm not worried about it. But let's get to the albums, because this is drastically different than last week. Normally I start, but I want you... Oh, no, normally I start by asking you what you think of the album that I gave you, so let's switch it around.
Yeah. Oh, you'd like me to intro? Well, Jim, last week I gave you Agent Fresco, Destrio, and I'm dying to know what did you think of the album?
I'm sorry, I really wanted to make you do it. Okay, this album, I have to say, the very beginning of it confused the living shit out of me. It confused the living. There's no other way to put it because I kept waiting for something to happen. The first song, I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And I'm waiting, and nothing happens. Like literally nothing happens. So the whole song basically is a lead up into the second song, which is really the first song on the track. And so I start off kind of like, what's wrong with me? Like, am I this tired that I'm just not hearing? Like, am I not hearing this right? But anyway, so my thoughts on this are. Do you know? I'll take this together. I'm gonna do what you kind of do with Funeral for a Friend. Do you remember the band Evanescence? I feel like he sings kind of like how she does in that kind of like style and the way that she emphasizes. I think she would fit that band better than him because I think she has more to her voice. He sounds like a pop singer that's forced into this band because he's a good singer. And there's moments like, especially when it gets into that, like the, not heavy, but you know what I mean? Like the bigger choruses where it works pretty well. But once it's like really kind of like empty. And one thing I did notice a lot, they make really good use of space as a band. There's a lot of times where it's just the singer and the drummer. They do that a lot. And it'll kind of be on the 4 and just where the other instruments will kind of just chime in for a second there. But the way that the band presents itself, they're technically really good. The two standout people to me in that band are the drummer and the keyboard player. And one band, he was great. Another thing that stood out to me, then this is why I wanted to go first, because I noticed this right away after I started to hear the guitars really come in the second song. Because like I said, in the first song, it's a lot of kind of ambient, not really musical stuff going on, building into it. The first thing I thought in the first 10 seconds was, that's a Stratocaster.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely a Fender player.
That's a Stratocaster. And I'm laughing in my head. I'm like, all I can think about is how much Dave hates Stratocasters. And I am just hearing Strats in both of my ears right now. And I'm smiling ear to ear. I'm like, yeah, oh, you hate them, huh? Do you?
No, I mean, they have their place, and obviously, I love this record. It's like one of my favorite records of all time, and it works really well here, right? Everything that's going on is working really well. But yeah, he's definitely a Fender player, but you can tell it's because he needs the versatility.
Oh, it's not because the Stratocaster is a great guitar. Duly noted.
You know. I'm just saying. I think he probably he has something else he likes. He plays at home.
Probably a custom shop Fender. But as a whole, the band, the songwriting is really good. I really appreciate the guitar work, not because it's technical. I appreciate it because it's not technical. I appreciate it because it's so simple, but not so. Like he makes good use of diminished chords in strange places, but in good places. You know what I mean? And it's something where it's not super like in your face, like, oh, look at me and my sweeps and my taps and da-da-da. But it's good writing. It's good guitar. I really appreciate the songwriting that goes into this. And there was a few times in this record where I heard a lot of Muse kind of like just like that really like operatic, just like so big, like almost like a parade, like a march kind of thing going on with it. I could absolutely see why you like it. I love it. Like I said, I think the singer's a great singer. I didn't mean to dog on him. It's just he sounds almost out of place in the context of everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I will say that it definitely took me probably 9 or 10 listens before I really like went, okay, I get what he's going for here, and it finally started to click. I do think that like what he's doing is it's real hit or miss with people, right? A lot of times I show people this record and they're just like, yeah, I don't like this whole like Mickey Mouse falsetto thing he's doing through the whole thing, and I'm like, I don't know, I just don't get that vibe from it. But like, it's just going for a very specific, like, kind of poppy, operatic, you know, sort of Muse-esque, but I think more dialed back and less thematic, I guess, or dramatic. More like
gothic,
maybe.
Kind of in a way, like just in that kind of style. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I got a lot of those kind of vibes for it, where I could hear like almost the big old church organ coming in the background in some of the sections, and it just seems like the whole vibe of it. And when you put it like that and I think about it, it does make sense. It's just when it really goes into the super pop stuff and he doesn't change and he kind of stays in that kind of thing, that's where I'm like, it feels like a little bit forced. But as a whole, I thought it was a really good record.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you liked it. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. I love those guys, and I love the stuff that they're doing. I'm really looking forward to the next one. They're also like really big in that Swedish sort of scene, and I think I'm pretty sure they live in Iceland. But they do.
No, I laugh because that explains so much then about it. Okay. Yeah. But they do a bunch of stuff. I think one of the guys in the band just did. There's a horror movie that just came out a little while ago called Lamb. I don't know if you've seen anything about it, but it's very creepy. It's like, you know, kind of in the vein of like Midsommar and sort of like some of those art house kind of horror movies. And he did the all the soundscape and all the music for the movie. But they do all this really cool, like out there stuff. Like all the stuff that the other guys work on don't sound anything like this, you know, like Arnor, the singer, he does like tons of work in other places as well. And it's all really cool stuff. I think they're just really cool musicians doing cool things together, and I don't think they're like defining it any one way, which is what I really like about it. But I will move on to the album you gave me, which Ume, am I saying that right? Ume, Monuments. I debated, and Rowan, somebody who's a regular on the channel, he said, why didn't I recommend you a different album called Phantoms? The Phantoms is a little bit rougher. It was the one before this. I love both, but I thought that Monuments would be a better one for you to listen to, because I feel like the production on that was a little bit more modern sounding, so to speak, than more kind of the garagey kind of style of Phantoms, in my opinion. But what did you think about it?
So I don't have a big story to go with this big one. I listened to it kind of once through while I was prepping dinner. And I'll be honest with you, it's not my cup of tea. And I think there's some really cool stuff going on there, right? Like, I really loved how riffy the guitar player is. Like, and what I really liked about that was that there was these moments where there was like this huge riff, and I like kind of forgot about it. And then I was like, oh, that riff is still going on, even though it's like this big hooky chorus, and it never got in the way, which obviously, I'm sure, you know, as you know too from experience, that is a really difficult thing to do. To be able to continue to play guitar that like you're having fun with, that isn't getting in the way of a singer, is very, very hard. And I love that the entire time I was listening to it, I felt like I was in a Kill Bill movie. Like the whole album to me sounded like tracks that were meant to be in cool indie movies or like cool action movies, right? And that part of it was really cool. I just didn't find myself connecting with the singer at all. Like, I was never really like hooked into anything she was doing. It just felt a little bit repetitive to me, but I liked the vibe. Like, I think it's something I could find myself listening to if I wasn't really paying attention to it. But when I was like focusing in and going like, what am I getting from this song? Nothing ever really grabbed me.
You know, the reason why the guitar is able to work so well with the vocal is because she writes them together. She's the guitar player. So when she's doing these riffs, she's kind of like trying to get to a riff where it's not so hard that she can't, sing over it, but it's catchy enough where it, you can hear it a bunch of times and not get bored of it, which is something that is also very difficult to do. It's easy to write, a guitar riff. It's much easier to ruin a guitar riff by playing it too many times. I kind of like him because it's not my favorite album from them, but I like this band as a whole because it is just, exactly what you're getting when you hear after you hear the first song. Like there's not too much deviation in it, and sometimes I want records like that. Like I don't need a record that takes me on like a mystical journey all the time. Like sometimes I just want to rock out or, drive fast or do something irresponsible. I don't know. I like music like that too, where I could just kind of turn my mind off.
Right. And it totally sounded like the theme music for that, right? Like there was a few of the tracks on there where I was just like, I feel like I should be driving away from something I just did that I'm not sure if I was supposed to do it. Like it just had that vibe to it. And I just wanted to be like, like driving down the road, like it's dark, it's black and white out for some reason, like it was definitely a cool vibe. I didn't get much more past that, and I don't know, maybe it's a repeat listen thing, maybe it's a do it 3 or 4 more times and get there. It just didn't grab me out the gate. No,
yeah, well, if you ever get a chance, go back and listen to the Phantoms album before you re-listen to this one, because I think it's a little bit more raw. I just wanted to see what you thought about, like, because when you're mixing this genre, it's tough because there's not a ton going on here. And if you noticed with the guitars, there's not 40 tracks of guitar on this record, and it does sound big still, but that's really minimal as far as the number of tracks used that they did in the recording. So I think it's difficult when you're the mixer and trying to get, a gigantic sound out of something like that when you're not having as many kind of pieces to fill out things here and there. And I think that they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, I have a hard time with stuff like this in particular, kind of not being lazy with it. If that's sort of the way to describe it. Like this is the type of band where you could be like, you put them in a room and you track the drummer and you're like, it's great. Let's just good. Like we'll move on, like then the bass comes in and you're like, one tone for the whole thing. That's fine. It works. Yeah. And then the guitar player comes in and you're like, yeah, I mean, we got all of it. And then, you end up just going like, I don't even need to do automation because the song's just all here. Like, like, and I don't mean that in a bad way in any way. Like it's a detriment of it being kind of solid all around, right? Whereas it's like you get some of these broader, like, polar opposite, like the Agent Fresco stuff, where it's like every part is like, all right, what are we going to do to build this out? And this next part's got to be super tiny. So how do we adjust the space in this thing or whatever? Whereas these guys just come in and they're just like, we're just going to lay down some rock tunes. There, that's it, like, and then, then at the end of the day, I'm sitting here mixing it going like, I should be doing more with this, right? But it sounds good. So like, what else do you do, And sometimes that's a tough question to answer,
It shows good discipline from the engineer to know I don't need to do anything else when I'm producing. It's like, this is exactly what you said. It sounds great as it is. If I add anything to it, what am I really adding to the song? Is it needed? No, it's not needed. Move on, print it, good to go. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fun album. So for next week, this is not many songs on this album. This is an old album. It's by a band called Focus. And the name of the album is Moving Waves. I am smiling because one of the songs on this album is incredibly good. Incredibly good. And I know you're gonna love it. And I know that there's going to be a point in it where you're just gonna not be able to not laugh. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
Okay. All right. One song, laughing part. I'm gonna have to look it up, or I'm gonna have to look out for it so that way I don't come back with I have no idea what you're talking about.
And then there's also going to be songs where you're just going to say, what the hell is this band and what is happening on this record? I can't wait. I can't wait.
All right. I'm going to give you a little bit of a weirder one this week too. So the band is called Tube Lord. And the album is called My First American Friends. And the only way I can describe it would be if Protest the Hero didn't have any gain on their amps and also were really into wizards. Yeah. There's more complexity there. They're really, really good, but they're really weird.
That is one of the strangest ways to describe a band, but I can already kind of hear it in my head. Huh. All right. I'm looking forward to it. I got that written down. I don't know. You got anything else you want to talk about today? I know you're not feeling so good.
Yeah, I actually sort of forgot about it halfway through. That's just how interesting we are. But no, I don't really have anything else. I feel like other than the pack rat, which was just all over my social media all week, I don't have too much else to talk about.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm writing an email to Guild. I'm halfway done with it. It's weird because I've never done this before, and I'm going to attach a video along with it that the public's not going to see, but I'm going to kind of scroll through like YouTube and be like, when I search for this guitar brand, look how many demos are done by them for that brand. Look how much like buzz there is. Like, you guys have nothing. Like, and just do my best to be like, look, let's, we could start together. You don't got to pay me, anything like that. Let's just, let me borrow a guitar and let me see what I think about it. And I'll give you some feedback if you're interested in that. If you're not interested in that and you're going to make me say nice things, then I'm not interested in working with you. But, you don't get anywhere without trying. So I'm going to work on that email right after this. Hopefully have it done for tomorrow morning. But I don't know. I guess this is a good place to wrap it up. Thank you guys all for listening to Audiomo Podcast number 8. Tomorrow is the live stream, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I look forward to talking to you guys there. And other than that, have a good rest of your day, everybody. Take it easy.